All right, so today we're going to talk about dividend yield as part 3 of our series on dividend investing for dividend stocks. Not mutual funds or ETFs. We're talking explicitly dividend stocks, and I want to dive into that because I think it's actually pretty important. Part 1, we talked about the most important things to look at when you're investing in dividend stocks. Part 2, we talked about the payout ratio, which is the most important thing to look at when you're investing in dividend stocks. But then I figured we'd start with what actually the dividend yield is, because I think that's important. A lot of people overlook the importance of the dividend yield, and and don't do this. Do not look at dividend yield as the impetus to invest in a stock just because the dividend yield is high. So we'll share that with you here today. So welcome to Heritage Wealth Planning, my friends. If you like what you see, subscribe. We talk all kinds of financial stuff, so don't forget to subscribe. Thumbs up. See those 2 thumbs up? Comments, questions, concerns, always welcome as well. So we take our trusty PVC pipe with a connector on the bottom there, and we're going to point out what dividend yield is. All right, so we take the stock price, and the stock price is easy to find. It's trading at $100 a share, so stock price trading 100. The dividend amount is $5 per share in this episode, in this example. It pays $5 per share. It doesn't matter if it's quarterly, we're just saying $5 per share for simplicity. What you do then is you take 5, you divide by 100, and that equals 5%. So here we have a dividend yield of 5%. All right, and let me write that a little bit better. That's pretty ugly. So we take 5 divided by 100, it's 0.05. So that's 5%. That's a dividend yield. All right. So question. What happens when the share price drops to 80? The dividend, we're going to say the same price. The dividend amount stays the same at 5, but the share price is 80. So now we take 80 and divide that into 5, and I'm not sure what we get there, 6.66 or something. Let's see. So we got to take my trusty calculator. There we go. 5 divided by 80, 6.25%. Yield equals 6.25%. So that's the dividend yield. It's literally that simple. So what's a better buy? Well, it depends, because is there a reason why the stock price has dropped 20% in value? If the stock price has dropped 20% in value because of whatever, the yield goes up. But maybe the yield is going up because the price of the stock is beginning a long trajectory south. It's on the precipice and it's just falling each and every day. Well, kind of like GE's done for almost the last 2 years. Maybe, I don't know. That's a higher yield than it was before. Does that mean it's a better buy? I don't know. So now we see what happens if the stock drops to 50. So you should be able to figure this out, my friends. Stock drops to 50. What's our dividend yield? We take 5, divide by 50, and we get 10% yield. All right, so now let's just use this for an example. Say the average stock's yield is 2.5. S&P 500. And we're yielding 10. Does that tell you something? Why are we yielding so much higher than the average S&P 500? Are we paying that much more of a dividend payout? I mean, because maybe we're paying $5 and the average stock in the S&P 500 is only paying $1? I don't think so. The other alternative is that the stock price has dropped from 100 to 50. Does that mean it's a buy? There might be a reason for the stock price to have dropped. Now, the opportunity here, of course, is that you can buy it, get a 10% yield, and if the stock price goes back up, all right, so now we're going to say we buy it here at 50. We buy it at 50, and we're getting a 10% yield. Stock price goes to 100. What's our yield? Still 10%. Because we bought it at 50. And as long as the dividend doesn't change, that right there at 50, at $5 a share is what we blocked into. As long as that dividend doesn't change, we are still getting a 10% yield, even if the stock price goes up to 100. That makes sense? Now, conversely, if the stock price drops to 25, which means the yield at that point is, I don't even know what that is. The stock price drops to 25. It's a 20% yield at that point, but what are we getting for a yield? It's a 20% yield for someone who buys the stock today, but again, we bought it at 50. We're still getting a 10% yield because we bought it at 50. So as long as that dividend doesn't change, regardless of the stock going up or going down, we are getting a 10% yield because we bought the stock at 50 bucks. It doesn't matter. It literally does not matter. So if you bought GE at 25, like Jim Cramer was recommending 2 years ago, look, everyone bashes Jim Cramer. I frankly like Jim Cramer. I don't follow him. I don't care. Literally don't care. But my goodness, he's just an entertainer. I get that. He's making good money, and I got no problem with Jim Cramer. But everyone loves to bash on Jim Cramer. Well, just why? He's just a guy on the radio, the TV. Who cares? But he was recommending G. Not recommending. He thought G was a good buy a few years ago. And man, I tell you, as if we haven't all made mistakes. So just anyway, so he's saying G was a good buy. Was at 25. Well, it wasn't a good buy because now it's at 9. Who knew? I didn't. So if you bought at 25 when you're getting a 4% yield, which is significantly higher than the S&P 500 as a whole, you thought it was a good buy, and you said, oh, I can only go up, and I'm locking my 4% yield. But guess what happened? No siree, Bobby. That sucker's gone down big time. And even worse, not only did it go down big time, it couldn't continue to pay that yield, that dividend. Couldn't continue to pay the dividend amount, which means they have slashed the dividend, and now you got a stock that declined, plus you got no dividend. So always remember, there could be a reason, could be a good reason, why the yield is significantly higher than other shares out there. Typically, that doesn't happen in vacuum. If something is paying that much higher of a dividend amount, all right, that much higher, if it's not due to profits, it's due to because the price of the stock is most likely going to drop. I mean, I don't know. But generally speaking, if it's paying a $5 dividend and everything else is paying $1, that might lead you to wonder, hey, what's going on here? Especially if the yield is significantly higher than the peers. You just got to wonder about that, and I'd probably stay away from it, frankly. Because I say, I don't want to take that risk. And it's a risk. You could make a lot of money. It could go back up to 100, in which case you're still getting that 20, whatever it is, 20% yield or whatever. You're still in there, and other people new to the stock are getting a whole lot less. But the likelihood of that happening while there is relatively small relative to the likelihood of going the other way like GE. So just keep that in the back of your mind. That's a dividend yield. Nothing fancy, just what's the dividend that's paying out and what's the stock price. Divide the two together and there's your yield. If it's significantly higher than the S&P 500 as a whole, you might want to wonder why. Why is it that much higher? And it might be a good reason. I don't know. It might be a value stock that is just for some reason undervalued. In that case, buy it. I don't have any problem with that. It might be that it's about to fall off bankruptcy. In that case, don't buy it. But you don't know. That's the problem. That's why I always say diversify, because you just don't know. All right, if you like what you see, subscribe, comment, question, thumbs up, of course. Go to the blog at Heritage Wealth Planning, and we'll see you next time. Thanks now.